All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the November 12th meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We've got a few things to do before we call the meeting to order. As we all know, these meetings now are being held electronically, and they comply with the governor's safer at home order. And to ensure the safety of all residents and staff, that is the purpose of those orders. All members of the HRA staff and presenters are participating from their homes or offices. And then there's a few things you want to cover before we start. So today, we don't have any public hearings at the HRA. The community comment is the only portion of the agenda where a person would have the opportunity to call in to provide comment by phone. You're allowed to speak about anything that is not on today's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. If you want to call in, the number is 800-374-0221. 800-374-0221 with a conference ID number 675-7087. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak. Liz Olson, our administrative support specialist, will time the speakers, and she'll let you know if you go over the 3-minute mark. Thanks in advance for your patience as we work to conduct the meeting online using different types of software. And as I mentioned earlier, people working remote from their homes. We hope there won't be any issues, but if there are, we'll get them corrected as quickly as we can. So I'll now call the meeting to order, and roll call, please, Ms. Olson.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Brindle? Commissioner Fisher?
Sorry.
Here.
Commissioner Staunton?
Here.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I will rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a meeting agenda this morning. Is there anyone who wishes to modify the meeting agenda? I'm hearing nothing. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as shown?
So moved.
There were
Moves.
two of us. I think it was
All right.
Ron and me.
All right, very good. Any further discussion with respect to the agenda? We got a motion and a second on approving the meeting agenda as shown. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle?
Hi.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton?
Aye.
Chair Hovland?
Aye. The agenda is approved. Now we are going to move on to community comment. So again, this is an opportunity for residents who would like to speak to the HRA about matters that are not on today's agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. You can call in and participate by calling 800-374-0221, conference ID 675-7087. Press star one to speak. An operator will put you in the queue, and you'll be muted until it's your turn, and then you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. We'll start by giving your full name and address. Administrative support specialist Liz Olson will time the speakers, as I mentioned earlier, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments or provide your questions to the HRA. Do we have anybody in the HRA queue for community comment?
Good morning, Chair Hovland, members of the Commission. We do not currently have anyone on the line. Because there is a slight delay in the broadcast, I would recommend waiting a minute or so before moving on. My clock shows it's 7:35, and so I will let you know if it's 7:36 and time to move on, or a caller, whichever comes first.
Thank you.
Just changed to 7:36. Let's just wait a few more seconds, please.
Understood.
For you to move on at this point.
All right, thank you. Very good. So we'll move on now to the consent agenda. There's a single item on the consent agenda, the minutes from September 24th. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Member Commissioner Fisher moves. Commissioner Brindle, I think I saw your lips move.
Yeah, you did.
All right. It's a second. All right. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, with respect to adoption of the consent agenda.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The consent agenda items consisting of this week, only the draft minutes of the regular meeting of September 24th, 2020 are approved. Now we'll move on to reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. We've got a few items there to discuss. And then the first item in that portion of the agenda is the potential approval of the partnership with the Metro HRA to expand the Family Affordable Housing Program and authorize staff to engage an attorney to draft the legal agreements that would be involved with that approval. And Stephanie Hawkinson, our Affordable Housing Development Manager, has this matter for us this morning.
Good morning. May I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do you all see it?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. This morning I'm following up with you on a program. I introduced this in June at a work session regarding the expansion of our partnership with Metro HRA to provide additional affordable housing opportunities in Edina. The Metro HRA operates a family affordable housing program. This is the outcome of the 1995 Holman Decree that called for the deconcentration of affordable housing. As a result of this federal decree, between 2001 and 2004, the Metro HRA acquired 8 rental properties in Edina that they've been leasing to households that qualify for their program. It is the Metro HRA's interest to grow this program in Edina by adding 8 more houses to the Edina portfolio, which has not increased in the past 16 years. Basic question is whether there's a need or a calling to expand this program. In short, the answer is yes. Currently, there are over 1,000 names on the waiting list. The Metro HRA experiences very low vacancy rates with little turnover. The families in the program are stably placed. There is poverty and need in Edina, as evidenced by over 800 children qualifying for free and reduced lunch program in 2019, which is even pre-COVID. Granted, some of these children could be in attendance through open enrollment. Even so, in the first 3 quarters of this year, over 190 households received rental assistance from VII. Of these households, half of them were had 4 or more family members. So what is this partnership? The Edina HRA will acquire moderately priced single-family houses in cooperation with the Metro HRA. The house would be rehabilitated to make sure it's up to code and meets health and safety standards. The Edina HRA would then lease the house to the Metro HRA for $1, who will then lease the program to a program participant. The Metro HRA would be responsible for all ongoing management and maintenance. We already have an agreement with Metro HRA pertaining to this program, so this would need to be modified to include the new home. So, as it shows the roles and responsibilities for the city or HRA, we would buy the home. We'd use Southdale 2 funds for the acquisition. We'd finance the rehabilitation of it and then lease it. And then they would oversee the rehabilitation. They would lease, go through the whole leasing process. The rent would be project-based Section 8, and then they would be in charge of the ongoing management and maintenance. This is the table that I was asked to create in June that shows the affordability breakdown of different programs of ours. Last summer, you approved the Homes Within Reach program, and that serves households with incomes between 50 and 80%. We have not been able to launch a single-family ownership program yet, and that would serve between 80 and 120% of AMI. And this program serves households with incomes below 50% of area median income. So different types of programs serve different income levels. I asked Terry Smith, who is on this call, for a success story. And she shared with me a story of a small family who had experienced predatory landlords, unhealthy living conditions that ultimately ended up with them living on the streets. Through this program, they have been stably housed for 2 years. Generally, there's a moral reason why we don't want people to be living on the streets, but there's also, with housing stability, there's better health outcomes, there's better educational outcomes as children are able to stay within a school, and it allows the adults, some who are working even while living on the street, but they're able to maintain their jobs if they have stable housing. I'm seeking $2 million of the Southdale 2 regular pool TIF funds for this program. This is an eligible use, as these will be rental properties for households that meet the income qualifications. After we use these funds to acquire 4040, and once we have my next item, when we talk about the future use of that property, before the end of the year, we want to swap out the funds from the regular pool with special legislation, so that's why there's a repayment column in here. With this allocation of $2 million, we'd still have $5.2 million left in this pool. With the cost of housing in Edina and with unknown repair needs, although we'll be judicious, $2 million may only provide housing for 4 households. We will work towards getting as many as possible, but I can't, without knowing what homes will be on the market and some of the rehab needs, and we'll be working with Metro HRA to make some of those determinations. I can't say for sure how many homes this would, $2 million would buy. The expansion of this program aligns with guiding principles, policies, and plans that have been previously approved. These include the comprehensive plan that calls for equal access and opportunities for all residents and fostering economic equity. The Race and Equity Report, which calls for programs and policies that serve to make Edina more welcoming and inclusive. The Council's Equity Statement regarding adapting the needs of all community members and applying the equity lens. And finally, the Council's Statement on Engagement regarding building trust by focusing on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we do have some policies that help support the approval of this program. So the next steps would be to obtain formal approval from the Metropolitan Council. They are aware of this program, and they support it being further investigated, and they wanted to hear back from you all before they sought final approval. It'd be drafting the leasing agreement between the Edina HRA and the Metro HRA to spell out the terms. It'd draft amendment to the cooperation agreement that's already in place, and then purchase the unit. So we would be coming back here for approval of the leasing agreement and the drafting amendments for the cooperation agreement. And that's all I have.
All right. We have questions or comments relative to the presentation by Stephanie Hawkinson?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Brindle.
Thank you. Stephanie, would the agreement with Metro HRA need to be amended each time a home is purchased and added to this program?
Chair, Commissioners, I don't believe so. I believe how this is different is right now the 8 homes that are in this program right now in Edina are owned by the Metro HRA. They are not owned by the Edina HRA. So it would be amended to show that we would, or the HRA would, own these properties and lease them to them. So it would be a one-time amendment.
Okay.
Other questions? We've got Terry Smith with us too. Yes, Member Anderson, Commissioner Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment as much as anything else. I checked MLS last night for the price range. And just as you mentioned, Director Hawkinson, there's a pricing challenge. As of last night, there was one available single-family unit at $350,000. Now, that's a two-bedroom on York, although they call for a special assessment assumption of like $7,000. So that it approaches $400,000. That's a two-bedroom, however. So I don't know if you have do you have a guideline or a goal of 3 bedrooms for single families?
Chair, Commissioner, our goal would be 3-bedroom, and we don't anticipate they would be buying 4 at once. We understand that this is going to require a lot of patience to be able to find the appropriate home. I would like to defer to Ms. Smith on whether or not even a 2-bedroom would be appropriate. I imagine it would be, but I would like that to come from her.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Terry Smith. I'm the director of the Metropolitan Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and we're really excited about this opportunity to provide more housing in Edina for voucher families. We do currently own some 2-bedrooms already in Edina. They remain occupied. I think there's plenty of families looking for 2-bedrooms. I think the reason we landed on focusing on 3 bedrooms is because 3 bedrooms are harder to find for families. So we could certainly fill 2 bedrooms. The reason we focused on 3 is just because they're harder to find in the market and there aren't as many available.
Yeah, I agree. Just to finish up here, there's one at 388 on West 55th Street and one at 399. But that has offers on it already. So yes, it'll definitely be a challenge going forward. It's just something I think to be aware of. But I think your goal for 4 units, if you average, say 500 after renovation, then I think that's pretty close. Okay, good. Well, that was my question and my comment. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Staunton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Stephanie, does this satisfy our kind of deadline on use of the funds, or are these funds not subject to that deadline, or how does that fit into that bigger picture?
Chair, Commissioners, these funds don't have that strict deadline. Okay. They need to be spent down. Bill would be able to speak to this more eloquently. We can't have them hanging out there forever, but there's not a strict deadline.
And are we conveying the money, or are we kind of reserving the money to use as they come up with appropriate sites, or how is that working?
Chair, Commissioners, we would be earmarking this money, but we would maintain it in our account until an opportunity arose in which we would draw it down.
Well, I just want to say I'm continually amazed, speaking of patience, at your patience and persistence with coming up with creative ways to figure out this problem that's really knotty. So thank you for your efforts on this. I think it's a great idea.
All right, Commissioner Brindle.
Thank you. That is the other thought that I have, and that is thank you for really looking at this and looking at it hard. I think it's one of the hardest, most difficult things we've asked to see if it can be accomplished, and it felt like it was something that we could probably, work at and over time find a way to do it, but to have had to turn it around really as quickly as it has turned around, that we find a path forward, it's very exciting. And now we have the advantage of having some tax increment dollars that we can put toward this. That's wonderful. And there's an end to those tax increment dollars. So I guess it's a situation of striking while we've got the dollars and seeing how much progress we can make while those dollars are available. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, my thanks, and, the ability to find partners to help make this happen is the key. And, we can't do this alone. And so, one family at a time, if we can make this happen. So thank you to both Stephanie and Terry.
Thanks, Commissioner Fisher. Yeah, when I would join my colleagues in those being supportive of those same comments about the creativity involved in trying to achieve what we've asked Ms. Hawkinson to achieve, and to Manager Neal too for making a very good hire. Ms. Hawkinson, who got right after her work. So, and always nice to partner with the Met Council, I think, Terry. So it's nice to have you with us this morning as well. Is there a motion to approve the partnership with the Metro HRA to expand the Family Affordable Housing Program and authorize staff to engage an attorney to draft legal agreements?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Staunton moves, Commissioner Brindle seconds. Further discussion. I had one question, and this may be for Ms. Smith or Ms. Hawkinson. Is this use of the funds, I suppose, contingent upon the Met Council approving this program? Is that accurate? Would it have been appropriate crafted the motion in terms of contingency, or don't we have to worry about that? Because we're retaining the funds.
Chair, Commissioners, we will not proceed with drafting the documents until after the Met Council meets and formally approves this program. They have given a preliminary nod of approval, and in fact, Manager Neal and I were at a meeting with some of the Met Council folks, and they already had congratulated us on the extended partnership. So I'm confident that the council will approve this, but yes, we will not start the documents or anything until after formal approval.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I may, the item is slated to go to the Community Development Committee on December 7th and then the full council on December 16th. But as Stephanie indicated, I presented an information item and had full support, so I anticipate success with approval.
Well, I like the forecasting from both of you. So, all right. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Ms. Olson, with respect to the motion as stated.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton.
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The motion is approved. We will enter contingently into this partnership with the Metro HRA to expand the Family Affordable Housing Program. And the staff, of course, has been authorized to engage an attorney to draft the appropriate legal documents once we have the Met Council approval. So, Ms. Smith, thanks for being with us this morning. All right, Ms. Hawkinson, thank you. And then matter as well, which is 4040 West 70th Street, an amendment there to deal with. Ms. Swenson from the Housing Foundation is with us as well this morning. So, Ann, thanks for joining us.
Welcome. I think Jeff Huggett might be here too, but my screen doesn't show him.
Yeah, I called in. I couldn't get a video link, so yes, I'm on as well.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Once again, I'd like permission to share my screen.
Yes, please.
Oh dear. Technical difficulties. Hold on a second. There we go.
Yep, you're on the screen.
Okay, great. There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Good morning again. Today on this item, I am seeking approval to modify the loan with the Edina Housing Foundation that was for $3.65 million. A year ago, the HRA approved a term sheet for an acquisition loan. The Edina Housing Foundation sought to acquire 4040 West 70th for an age-restricted affordable housing development. The loan approved in February was for $3,650,000 at 0% interest for 2 years. The intent at that time was that the foundation would sell the land to a developer and repay the loan with the sales proceeds. In June, the foundation closed on the site, so it is now the foundation's property. In March, they sent out a request for qualifications to 5 potential developers. 2 developers participated in a Q&A session, and the proposals were due June 26th. The proposals were sent to developers that we knew were experienced in both affordable housing and age-restricted housing. After a thorough review of the proposals, I'm happy to announce that the foundation has selected a partnership between Loopy Development Partners and Ecumen. Negotiations regarding the proposal and the development agreement took place over the summer and fall and concluded with an executed development agreement and ground lease agreement. One of the foundation's priorities was permanent affordability. They did not want the development to be converted into market rate after 15 years or even 40 years when the need for affordable housing keeps increasing. One way to achieve this was for the foundation to become a development partner by contributing the land through a land lease. Rather than selling the land and ceding control, the foundation will maintain ownership and lease to the development owners for 99 years. So as they will not be selling the land, there will not be any sales proceeds. Therefore, the foundation is seeking an amendment to the loan so the loan will be forgiven if certain conditions are met. So the conditions for forgiveness are that the selected developer shall receive all governmental approvals and entitlements necessary to construct the site. The selected developer shall close on or otherwise secure commitments for all financing, and that they have entered into a ground lease. So the budget implications for this. So the current source of funds, as I indicated in the last item, was regular pooled Southdale 2 TIF funds. And now that we know the development, this year I will be seeking to swap out those funds for the special legislation pooled TIF funds that have a sunset at the end of the year. With that, the current source, the pooled funds, with the approval you just had, will have $5.2 million remaining in that. Once we swap out with the special legislation, that pool still has $735,000 in it. And again, those funds sunset at the end of this year. So the next steps will be, yet this year, the developer will be hosting a neighborhood meeting. Early in 21, they're going to start their entitlement process. They've already had a preliminary meeting with Director Teague. They'll start applying for financing right away in February, and that with the various applications that will go through July. And if they are awarded all their financing the first round, we could see a closing in 2022. Now, I want to remind you all that having an affordable housing development receive all the necessary financing within the first year is not typical. I know it happened for Amundsen Flats, but that is very unusual. It often takes up to 3 years to get all the financing. So I just want to make sure expectations are held in check. But that, if all goes well, that could happen. And that's all for the presentation.
questions for Manager Hawkinson or Chair Swenson? Chair Swenson, do you have any comments? Or Commissioner Brindle, go ahead.
No, let's hear from Ann first.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Chair Swenson, you want to give us your thoughts on this?
Well, technically, Jeff is our chair.
Oh,
I'm his
all right.
sidekick, so I'm going to let Jeff speak to this. I know he's on the call. Jeff, can you speak to this? I'll answer any questions, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the main thing, I think Stephanie really did a great job with the presentation here. Our real goal after talking with all of the commissioners and the mayor was to really get permanent affordability. And the ground lease seemed to be the best way to do that, to ensure that. And so we're very excited for this opportunity. We think the developer is going to be top flight, and the project that they'll propose hopefully will meet with both the councils and the neighborhoods acceptance of a really nice project. And I think it's close to 120 units or so that might be able to be fit on the site, and 99 years of affordability. That's an exciting prospect to us. So yeah, we're very excited with the partnership with the HRA and with Ecumen and Loopy.
Thank you, Chair Huggett. Any Commissioner Brindle? No, do you want to ask a question or have a comment?
I guess I just have a comment, and that is that I'm really glad to see that the funds that expire at the end of 2021 would be able to be used for this, and at the end of 2021, hopefully we have little or nothing left, that we have successfully been able to use those funds and put them toward projects that push our community forward in providing affordable housing. And this is a great example. And so to the degree that 3.65 million can be transferred to occupy those limited available funds, I think is a great idea.
Thank you. Other comments from other commissioners? Questions?
Mayor?
Yes, Member Swenson and then Chair Huggett too. I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit about the analysis the Housing Foundation went through on looking at this ground lease notion. The whole idea of trying to achieve permanent affordability of the housing, and how you came to the conclusion that you came to.
I think the most important thing on this was that we listened to all of you, because when we first talked about affordable housing with you, even on the 70th and Cahill site, which is 45 years, you talked about, can we make these sites longer? What can we do? So this really is in response to listening to all of you. The developer we picked because they're paired, Ecumen and Loopy, to us seemed like a perfect fit for senior housing. Ecumen has a huge background, obviously, in what they do with that. So we started talking to them about this ground lease concept, and the documents have gone back and forth, but they're signed off on it, and they're prepared for this concept. It won't be new to them. Jeff Huggett has been working on this for Jeff, about a month now, with Stephanie, and I'm really pleased to get where we are on this. So it's a solid plan. They know what the restrictions are. They have a couple different options to show the neighborhood, which I think is really good. And I think for us, senior housing was our next step, because we heard from so many seniors about this need. Jeff?
I think the only thing I would add to what Ann said is, we sat down right away with, as Jerry Gilligan is also on the foundation board, So we sat down with Jerry and Jay Lindgren and Alex Selke over at Dorsey and said, hey, how do we do this? How do we make permanent affordability? And the answer came back, well, the longest that you can actually do it by statute in state is a 40-year deed restriction. So the only way to get around that was really to stay in the land and own it. So that's really how the ground lease came up as an idea. And yeah, the creativity with that Dorsey and Board Member Gilligan came up with, I thought was really pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Did that prompt anything from any other commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little. This one means a lot to me. I think all the work that's gone behind the scenes and with our housing foundation, the creativity. But this is ultimately all about people. And probably within 6 months of being on the city council, we had approved a development project that ultimately resulted in a demolition of a building and a loss of some apartment units for some seniors. And I remember specifically getting a call from a member of my church talking about his mother being essentially, evicted from her apartment from that development project and wondering what the city is doing about it. What are we doing to achieve affordable housing for seniors? His mother was somebody who had a job in the city and could walk there from her apartment, and that was lost. And she was going to have to move in with them. That was their only solution. And so here we are 3.5 years later, on the cusp of doing an exciting project that will serve exactly that group. These could be seniors that might even work a part-time job in the Southdale area. They'll have access to transportation, all the things that would help them be vibrant members of our community and continue on. And at the time, I just kind of threw my hands up, like, I don't know what we can do. Housing's really expensive. And it's just so nice, to have this opportunity before I'm off the council and off the HRA to see a real tangible example of where we can all be creative and make this kind of thing happen. So thanks to everybody that's been involved.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher, for those remarks. I drive by this building virtually every day on the way to my office and look over and think about the day when it will be occupied by all these seniors, and that it will be an affordable place for seniors to live that are qualifying to live there, to be in total comfort in the sort of living circumstance that they're in. As Commissioner Fisher mentions, to be able to live in a safe environment, in a beautiful commercial neighborhood, to be able to walk to things that they want to be able to do, it's a wonderful thing for the Housing Foundation. I think, first of all, they get credit for coming up with this idea for us, and then at our direction, trying to figure out how to create a greater period of affordability to come up with this idea with Dorsey of a ground lease. So I think this is a wonderful use of these funds that are in that TIF district, where we're trying to drain them down, as Commissioner Brindle says, by the end of 2021. And this is a qualifying project for that. So I think I'm really looking forward to it as well. I think we all are. We've all been so enthusiastically supporting this. Other commissioners have any other comments? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve the First Amendment to the loan documents for the acquisition of 4040 West 70th Street with the Adana Housing Foundation in the amount of $3,650,000.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion from Commissioner Fisher and a second from Commissioner Brindle. Any further discussion? Roll call, Ms. Olson, with respect to the motion as stated.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The motion's approved. It's another exciting step seeing this come to fruition. So thanks, Chair Huggett, for being with us this morning. Ann Swenson, always great to see you, our former colleague, now serving us so ably on the Housing Foundation, and all the rest of the commissioners as well. So thanks for joining us. And now we're
Thank
going to go on to Centennial
Thank you.
Lakes Fund. We're going to get an updated investment strategy proposal from Bill Neuendorf, our Economic Development Manager. Mr. Neuendorf?
Yes, good morning. I have a brief presentation that I'll share. This is the same information that was included in the packet. It was simply reformatted to fit on the screen a little bit better. But every few years, we provide an update on our Centennial Lakes Fund. Back in the 1980s, the city created the Centennial Lakes TIF District, which over its years has done very well as far as delivering results, both physical structures and some public space, as well as revenue. This is one of those unique TIF funds that was created back in the years when state law provided much greater flexibility. And so while this TIF district was closed several years ago, there's still a fund balance that remains that we have used to make public improvements and planning for long-term public improvements. So we're at the point where I wanted to give you an update on where we are in that account, and then also plant some seeds for some of your input about types of projects to consider in the future. We're also recommending that we follow some guidelines when we select those projects. I'm not going to go through these in any level of detail. All of these statistics were included in the packet. But over the years, we have used the interfund loan mechanism to borrow money to loan it from this TIF district to other new TIF districts as seed money. And we're to the point now where TIF districts like Pentagon Park are generating income on their own, and they can repay those loans. So in the next couple years, we're going to see a balance growing in the Centennial Lakes Fund. We do have a few projects that are programmed to use these monies. Some roadway projects, some long-term planning up at 44th and France. Each of those are included in the capital improvement budget. But at the pace that we're on, in about 5 years, we'll have a balance of about $2.3 million in this account. And these funds, while they technically don't expire, we want to be diligent and use these funds in a good public purpose. And so we're estimating we have room and sufficient funding for at least one and possibly up to 3, maybe even 4 future projects. So what we want to do is get that balance down to 0 in about 8 years. There's nothing magical about that date, but again, we want to have a plan in place. The map that I'm sharing now is the boundaries where these funds can be invested and expended. So the portion of the city, basically the eastern 2/3 of the city are eligible. So from Tracy Road to Cahill Road and everything west, or I'm sorry, everything east. So the greater Southdale area, the business park off of Highway 100, Valley View and Wooddale, that area, the Grandview area, 50th and France. When these boundaries were established back in 2011, we wanted to include each of the primary business districts within these boundaries. So that's a fact of law that we have to constrain ourselves to. So staff has prepared a set of recommended guidelines to consider as we identify projects to fund with these monies. And we're asking that you approve these guidelines today. The primary focus we're recommending is to invest in capital projects, focus more on building things rather than planning or just long-term plans, and building projects that add long-term value and overall benefit to the entire community. We'd suggest focusing on delivering public improvements And of course, any engineering costs or architectural costs would also be included. And some of the outcomes we hope to achieve as we make these investments is really to help strengthen our economic base throughout the city. So strengthening our property tax base, adding jobs, stabilizing some commercial areas that might be edgy, retaining commercial businesses and growing new businesses. That's ultimately what we want to achieve, is to make sure that we've got a solid economic base throughout the city. We'd also look at multimodal traffic improvements with some of these funds. We've done that in the past with the promenade. We funded 2 rounds of those improvements with these monies. And that's a way that you can benefit customers, employees, as well as residents. So as far as prioritizing projects, we want to be careful that we just don't fund the first thing that plops in our lap, but to be more strategic about it. So we prioritize projects that do not have a dedicated funding source and projects that are not currently included in the capital improvement plan. We could also use these funds to supplement a budget to elevate the quality or the outcomes of a project that's otherwise funded. For example, we could improve energy efficiency, sustainability, resilience. We could enhance the design or materials. We have to be careful that these funds cannot be used to strictly build a public building like a fire station or something like that, but it's that public infrastructure improvement that we could use these for. And again, we're thinking that these funds should be completed by 2028, earlier if possible. But again, there's nothing magic about that. We want to just keep things moving. And recently, staff brainstormed some projects that have been talked about for many years. They go up and down in conversation level. But these are examples of some projects that we could fund with these monies. The first is public parking or district parking at 44th and France. That's been a goal for many decades, frankly, and with the small area plan being finished, staff has already started to convene conversations with the property owners there. It might also be possible to make some improvements on France Avenue to the traffic signals. While France is a county road, we frequently hear complaints that it's difficult to make turns off of France Avenue, and it might be possible to make some improvements to that by upgrading those traffic signals. A third project that's been discussed for many years is the pedestrian bridge that goes across Highway 62. It leads through Roslyn Park. That pedestrian bridge is not handicap accessible. It's pretty limited in its availability. While it's technically owned by MnDOT, there's not a plan in place for them to upgrade it. So that could be a project where if we felt it was important, we could upgrade that bridge with our monies. But those are just 3 examples that we had in mind. I'm happy to answer any questions and hear your discussion of ways to improve this or other projects to consider. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right, thank you. Are there questions for Director Neuendorf? I'm sure there are. Yes, Commissioner Brindle.
So as I look at the TIF boundary map, the thing that shouts at me is if we intend to improve access to light rail, that route is entirely outside of that boundary map. It comes into Edina about at morning. It doesn't come into Edina, but it kind of rims the city in the north and then toward the west and ends at, for our purposes, at Golden Triangle. And that's entirely outside of that boundary map. So for looking at our ability to provide Edina residents access to light rail, we wouldn't be able to do that as a TIF project. and I look at it when you talk about attracting businesses. Businesses go to where stuff is, and there are businesses locating conveniently to light rail all the time, and so those would be opportunities that would open themselves if we could use some public improvement money such as this to soften our borders toward light rail. Let's see. The other thing, there was one other thing, the PED bridge across town, that really is a priority. So I hear stories about when we have the 4th of July fireworks and people are walking across that bridge. They don't count how many people are on the bridge when they cross that bridge. Everybody just goes at their own pace. And when that bridge is full of people, it sways. And so I don't even want to guess how much sway is left in that bridge. So I do think that's a high priority. Though the items on that list, the public parking at 44th and France, absolutely, that's a high priority. And can we fund it all? I doubt it. But I do think the bridge across Crosstown is long overdue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Bill, what was the projected amount that you expect to have available, even a range of monies you expect to have available to spend by 2028?
Yes, Chair Hovland, it's in 2025, we'll have a balance of about 2.3 million.
Yeah, it's not much.
So while it's a lot, it goes quickly when you start talking about major highway bridges.
Yeah, it does.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Chair.
Bill, this seems like as a dovetail with our next agenda item, it would be ideal for some of the infrastructure items that are talked about in both the Grandview District Framework and the Grandview Transportation Plan. Would those be eligible expenses?
Yes, they certainly would be. Yeah, the Grandview District is one of the qualifying areas. We are planning to make some improvements to the roadway networks next year. In fact, you'll have an update, I believe, at your December meeting about where we are with those projects. But we can't do everything in our December presentation. So these monies certainly could be used to supplement and make other improvements in that Grandview District.
Sure. So I think as we talk about the next item, we're talking about making a renewed push in 2021 to redevelop the site at 5146 Eden. There's going to be some corresponding items of infrastructure that are associated with that site as well as with the greater Grandview District that I think we should think about these monies for.
Thank you, Commissioner. Manager Neuendorf, with respect to the district parking at 44th and France, could you tell us generally where you are in those discussions? I think there's probably 4 property owners involved in that land area behind, I'll call it behind Convention Grill, or a little bit southwest of Convention Grill.
Yeah. There are, I think, 11 different property owners, so it's not a fast or easy conversation. We had an initial meeting not everyone could make it, but we had about half of the people on a phone call back in August. I've spoken or corresponded with each of the property owners. So far, they're all interested in having conversations. So far, none of them are interested in selling or dedicating land or giving easements. But they were all open to sitting down again and having a further conversation. The August meeting was hindered in that the largest property owner was not able to attend. So with the pandemic, there's been a lot of impact of various businesses, and the gentleman that owns the largest property was just opening one of his other businesses after being closed for 6 months. And so he suggested that this is not a good time to talk about that he really needs to keep his businesses afloat. So we'll come back to them, try to set something up in the early spring of next year when things hopefully settle down from them and they're a little bit more open to having a conversation that gives us some outcomes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
So I would say, without getting into too much detail, in the scheme of things, projects like 44th and France parking solution is like a perfect project that using this sort of funding. I would say the Grandview projects as well, infrastructure changes we can make that will enhance the business and residential capacity of those areas is, in my opinion, what the TIF funds were for to start with. I would get a little worried, and I agree with Commissioner Brindle that the bridge over Crosstown is in need of replacement. But to me, there's a source of funding for that. It may not be as quickly as we want it to happen, but I would sort of say, let's try not to spend the money on things where there are other sources. Unless we actually believe it's a safety concern, in which case I would hope MnDOT would share that concern. In general, that's and the only other thing I saw in your presentation that caused me a little bit of pause is the qualifier that they're not on the CIP. And to me, if something's not even on a 5-year CIP, then I'm wondering, well, where's the priority there? So just think about that one a little bit. I would think it would be the qualifier would be they may be on the CIP, but there's no funding in sight. So now they've met the qualification of being somewhat important, to somebody to be on that list, but no funding source identified. Just a thought, it's not super critical, but thank you.
Thanks.
One of the things that we've talked about since the guidelines and the design principles were created in the Southdale district is eliminating some of the super blocks and having, I'll call them, streets that are more internal to those blocks that give us the opportunity to carve up those super blocks. And there may be developments coming over time that provide that opportunity for us to create new ways to move people and traffic through some of those areas. Would those internal roadways, as I would characterize them, be public infrastructure type improvements for which some of this money might be available, even from a design standpoint?
Sure, I would certainly think so. If it's dedicated as right of way or given to the city via a public easement, I think those would qualify.
All right, thank you. Other commissioners?
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you. Bill, I noticed in your presentation you have about 7 references to interfund loans. Basically, I think our conversations this morning have centered on brick and mortar. And I don't have a strong background in interfund loans. I did do a little research going into this morning, but it's general research. I wonder, could you comment just a little bit about why they're there and why we might consider that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The interfund loan strategy has been used by many cities and by Edina for quite some time. The biggest interfund loan currently in this district was used to support the Southdale 2 project back in 2011 as we were coming out of the recession. And at that time, the city made a $5 million interest-free loan to Simon Properties to get things rolling at the mall and the surrounding areas. So rather than the city going into debt to borrow the money, we essentially borrowed it from ourselves through this interfund loan mechanism. So as the Southdale District has performed exceedingly well, we've been able to make each of those loan repayments. Our final repayment will happen at the end of 2021 as the Southdale 2 TIF expires. So we'll use those monies to repay the initial loan plus interest to Centennial Lakes. That was in that case, it was very advantageous for the city to have some money available without having to go into public debt for it. The other loans are smaller seed money. So when we first started Pentagon Park District, for example, it was just coming out of foreclosure. There were, I think, like 6 out of the 9 buildings were vacant. There wasn't a whole lot of money to be generated initially. So we borrowed $100,000 just to help us pay for staffing expenses, legal expenses, things like that. And that's a more typical way to do these interfund loans. We've done that for a few of our other districts when it was appropriate.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good. Other commissioners have comments or inquiries? Or are there other comments or inquiries, I should say? Is there a motion with respect to this particular matter? The motion would be to approve the guidelines for use of Centennial Lakes fund balance as proposed by our economic development manager, as he's shown this morning.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Anderson moves. Commissioner Brindle seconds. Any further discussion with respect to the proposed guidelines?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher, I was just going to raise your issue. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, is it necessary for us to be voting on it in a way that kind of raises what's written there right now? I mean, I'm assuming there's some level of flexibility that we would all want still. So, and is it important that we approve it specifically right at this moment? I guess I just don't know what the relevance of us making a vote right now this morning.
Manager Newendorf or Manager Neal?
I would say the relevance isn't necessarily tied to this morning, but we can tell you that that we get lots of questions about this money and how it can be used and where it can be used, and not just internally, but from folks in the community that know it exists as well. So having some kind of general guidance from the HRA with regards to how it could be used would be helpful to staff in kind of putting parameters around those development discussions.
Manager Newendorf, why don't you put back up your slides and put back up slides 5 and 6, and that may help for this discussion. I think 5 in particular probably meets some guideline goals that everybody be comfortable with. And when we get to 6, and that's the issue that Commissioner Fisher raised with respect to, shouldn't it be in the capital improvement plan, just not a high priority? So that might be something we want to talk about, is whatever we want to.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair,
that are consistent with slide 5. Yes, Commissioner Staunton.
could I make a suggestion? I guess the question is, if these were selected in the last page of the report, it talks about on the recommended guidelines, the following guidelines should be applied when selecting projects to be funded. I assume those would come back to us ultimately for approval. So maybe it's selecting projects for council approval to be funded or something like that. So that way we're not, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to figure out which ones are going to have a chance of getting approved and being, internally not wasting your time on things that aren't going to fit within these parameters. And if we did that, then the last item is just examples.
Can you comment?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Commissioner Staunton. Any project before it gets, approved or purchased or engineered, would go back before this body for project approval. As Scott had mentioned, we do get a lot of questions and inquiries, and it's helpful for us to have guidance to push some of these forward and to let some of them stay on the wayside. In regards to Commissioner Fisher's question about the inclusion in the capital improvement plan, maybe there's a better way to word that, but in the city, so the city has a 5-year capital improvement plan, but then there's always other projects that just don't make the cut. Maybe the value isn't there. Maybe it's more of a long-term thing to keep our eyes on. So sometimes there's projects that are out there. We know that there's a need. For example, that pedestrian bridge over the highway is perhaps the best example of that. We know it's out there. We know it's got to happen sometime. We hope that MnDOT steps up at some point. So it's not currently in our 5-year capital plan, but it's out there, and we know that when the time is right, we want to be able to jump on it and get it done. So that was the type of project I was anticipating. Certainly, if I was not intending to sidestep the CIP planning process, because certainly that's a process that is there's a lot of time and effort to make sure that we've got a list of best projects.
So, Mr. Chair, could I propose that we amend the motion to insert in the recommended guidance the sentence that says the following guidelines should be applied when selecting projects to be funded be modified to say selecting projects to be proposed to the HRA or the council for funding.
All right, is there a second to that amendment, proposed amendment?
I would second that.
All right, Member Fisher seconds, Commissioner Fisher seconds. Further discussion on the amendment? Roll call, please, with respect to the amendment as stated.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. The amendment is approved. And then as to the main motion, discussion there. All right. Roll call as with respect to the main motion.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye. That motion is approved to establish those guidelines for use of the Centennial Lake Fund balance with the appropriate amendment passed as well. All right. Thank you, Manager Neuendorf. And now you have one other matter, and that is the old public works site. It actually has an address, 5146 Eden Avenue, and Manager Neal looks like he has a few opening comments that he wants to make on that matter.
I do.
Executive Director, I should say, in this capacity,
Yeah.
ED.
Just don't call me late for dinner. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. I think what we want to do this morning is resume our discussion about the future of 5146 Eden Avenue. From a use standpoint or future of this land, it is a complex question, and that the complexity of the question has really made it very difficult for us to get a unified vision about how to proceed, both from a land use standpoint, but also from a process standpoint. It's been a complex issue, and we want to seek some clarity on a pretty key process question, and that is, how do we establish who our private sector development partner is going to be? We can do this as an HRA through a bilateral partnership with Frauenschuh. Frauenschuh wants to do that. They've proposed that to the HRA. They are actively interested in pursuing a bilateral partnership. However, we know from a staff standpoint, and you may as well also from just a community standpoint, that there are other potential development partners for this site. From a staff recommendation, we recommend that we enter a competitive RFP process to pick a development partner. But we need to make sure, we need to have that choice made by the HRA itself. And so that's what we are here to do today. From a staff recommendation standpoint, we'd like to present to you our recommendation on a competitive RFP process, not a hybrid process or a dual process or anything else. There's so many complex decisions to be made during this. We want to try to make this one as simple, not easy as possible. So what we'd like to do today is give Mr. Neuendorf a chance to lay out the recommendation. We don't need a decision on this today, but we did want to make the presentation today with the hope that we could get an HRA decision at your December meeting on December 10th, I believe it is. And that's all I have for you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. That's good backgrounding. Manager Neuendorf.
Yes, thanks. I'll share my screen with the presentation. Let's see. So this is the 5146 presentation. Just a real quick refresher, an aerial photo of the site. It's about 3.3 acres, just west of Highway 100, behind Jerry's Food, and just south of the Starbucks drive-thru. Just a reminder for posterity that in 2008 to 2010, the community group put together 7 guiding principles that we've applied to each and every project in this area. We would want to keep those in mind as we move forward with any activity on the site as well. A couple key things, Executive Director Neal mentioned many of these, but as this group knows, and probably the folks listening as well, there's been several years of community input on this site. We've put efforts together on multiple occasions to try to identify what type of new public facility is most appropriate for the site and what could be built at an appropriate cost. So far, we've not been able to identify any singular public facility for the site that meets those criteria. However, about a year ago, the fire department received a study about future fire department needs, and it was suggested that we look at this site and others as a possible location for a future fire station number 3. That study indicated that we should plan to build that station in 5 to 10 years, but certainly finding a location for it is one of the very first steps. So the fire department is doing a more detailed study to ascertain if this is indeed a good site, the best site, or the worst site for a fire station. As Scott mentioned, Franshu remains very interested in the property. They've expressed that interest to this group, to staff on many occasions. We know that other developers are also interested. With the pandemic and just with the situation out there these days, we've not actively reached out to any developers for many months. But what staff recommends is, first of all, complete our evaluation of the needs of the fire department. We think that'll be finished by the end of this year or very early in 2021. That would help us better understand whether or not we should retain a portion of the site for those needs. After we have that information available to us, staff recommends that we prepare a request for proposal that we would put out on the street and solicit competitive offers to sell or do a long-term lease for a portion of the site. As part of that RFP, we would include a summary description of the type and the scale of development that we prefer on the site. Staff thinks we're in a really good place to do that because we've tried so many different types of projects over the years. We've learned that only 2 or 3 elements will fit on the site. I think early on we tried to fit 4, 5, 6, 7 different things on this property, and each time we learned that it's just not big enough to do everything. We think that from what we've heard, it's important to maintain some public green space on the site, and also to provide a pedestrian crossing to get over the railroad tracks and connect over to the Jerry's parking ramp and the west side. In addition to creating that request for proposals that identifies what we're looking for, staff would also prepare a simple process to consider and review multiple offers. We want to be cautious not to enter into a very expensive and time-consuming beauty contest for the developers, but to do something a little bit more straightforward and effective. What we would suggest doing is have staff prepare these materials and then present a draft of this information to the HRA board, to this group, in first quarter of next year. Based on input and edits, we would then issue the RFP and seek offers. Our aim would be to select the development group in the second quarter of next year, and then have them move forward in full steam to get the site entitled by the end of 21. That would then put us in a position to start with construction in spring or summer of 2022. So that was what staff would suggest that you consider, and I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any other discussion. As Scott mentioned, we don't need an immediate answer today, but we should have a plan in place as 2021 hits. I think it's been many years. Maybe we can get some action going in 21 and 22. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions for Manager Neuendorf? Comments about his recommendations?
I do, and I don't have my video on because my battery is not keeping up with my power. So this is Mary Brindle, for those who see me.
Commissioner.
So among the options offered, I don't see the option to sell the property, which was the initial plan as I first became a council member, was to sell the property and use those proceeds to, at the time, to help pay for the new public works site. So I guess I would like to see that option on the table. In looking back, unless I have forgotten something, the last time the city did a massive, and I shouldn't say massive, it's just bigger, but a public-private partnership sort of development was Centennial Lakes. It might be Grandview. Maybe Grandview is the most recent one, but Centennial Lakes is probably the biggest one we've done. And I don't see that the city has a lot of experience in this. It's been very fortunate in the developments that have been public-private partnerships, but this one we clearly are not comfortable with. And if we were, we would have found a way forward by now. And this one just continues to elude us, albeit the fact that the property has gained in value over the years. So while I felt like this was kind of a ball and chain around my ankle, Bob Stewart reminded me that it was continually increasing in value. So that's not a bad thing. So that's good to keep in mind, but I guess I would like to see the option of selling the property for development, knowing full well that the 7 guiding principles are there, the zoning is there, the TIF district is there, and so all those things help the city have a stake in how that development would proceed.
Manager Neuendorf, do you have a comment? I think there embedded in one of your documents was the notion that the property would be sold, as I recall. At least that was a presentation.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, it was on the 5th slide and also in the written report. So staff would recommend that the RFP offer to sell a portion of the land. We could also entertain a long-term land lease, similar to what you just approved for that 4040 project down on 70th Street. But I think that's the direction that staff would recommend. If a portion of the site needs to be retained for a future fire station, we definitely want to consider that as well. But I think we've exhausted the exploration of retaining the entire site for a public use, and it's our recommendation to move forward, expecting a sale or a long-term lease in the future.
All right. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Fisher.
I mean, on the surface, I don't have any issues with what's being laid out in front of us, other than, a little bit of concern that, we went through a process, albeit some time ago, to select a developer to work with us. We then, and I'm going to apologize, my dog's going crazy and I'm the only one home today. There's really nothing I can do. But we selected the developer, and then we put all kinds of conditions on, this percentage of public use and all of that. And I would argue, and we've talked about this, our expectations were unrealistic. And we've learned that with our developer partner over time. At the same time, that developer partner has relationships with, other businesses in the Grandview neighborhood that I think would be conducive to us working, to get them relocated so we can then move the other Grandview plan elements along. My concern is if we go out to just a wide open process, that may really inhibit some of those domino pieces from falling. They may not. It's just there's a risk. And this notion that if we go out to the open market, that somehow we're going to get the best price for the land, while that may be true, my understanding of real estate is that the value of the land is contingent on what the use that we're going to put on that land. So if you put a Domino's pizza business on there, that will get a certain value. If you put senior co-op housing and medical office, that will lend itself to a certain value. So it's really, once we choose the use, the land value gets determined somewhat. So I just would want to have a little bit of discussion about, are we kind of shutting the door on some possibilities that would be really good, and are we being fair to ourselves and our development partner to just sort of move in a different direction?
Thank you, Commissioner. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think those questions are really key questions for the HRA to answer. I can tell you, of course, if the HRA
Yeah, he's frozen up.
The internet could not handle the wisdom he was about to lay on it, and it's just too much.
Are we back?
He's
maybe
back.
I was gone.
Yeah,
We're going to do. I'll just repeat myself. I think those questions that Commissioner Fisher just shared are the key questions here. I think from a staff standpoint, what we're seeing is continuing to get questions from Crown Shoe about when can they come in and start working with staff, and when can they get in front of the HRA, and when can they get in front of the council, and when can they have work sessions. And at this point, we are telling them, we don't know if you're the guy yet, right? We don't have any direction about doing a bilateral deal with you. If that's their direction that we get from the council, we're going to engage them positively and with a lot of energy, and we're going to devote a lot of staff time to it. But it's hard for us to do that until we've got a clear direction to do that from you on this very fundamental question.
One of the things that I understand the recommendation, but I also keep thinking about the fact that this has been 16 years of what we call admiring the problem, a great Minnesota tradition, as we've talked about. And we did go through an RFP process. We went through a process. We started with about 15 developers, and as Commissioner Fisher says, it was several years ago, probably quite a few years ago now. Got it down to 5, interviewed all of them, selected Frauenschuh. It seems to me like we went through this conversation a couple of years ago, and all along the way, we've been trying to figure out how to meet the expectations of the group of 52 people that helped create the framework for this site. And I think what's happened over time is that, excuse me, I'll get rid of that. What's happened over time is that we've come to have some thoughts of our own, I think, about how to potentially develop this property. And some of the ideas that have surfaced now from our development partner that was picked, Frauenschuh, someone listening into this meeting for the first time would be wondering, well, why do you keep talking about Frauenschuh? Well, we talk about Frauenschuh because they were the company that was picked as our potential development partner on this matter. And then as we've gone along, we've seen Avador come online. We have folks that worry about traffic patterns. We're doing some work on infrastructure in that area. And at least my thinking has evolved towards it's a great place for someone to live. And what about senior co-op? And now we have Frauenschuh with United Properties as a potential development partner that specializes in senior cooperative housing. We've got a medical facility nearby that wants to expand. As Member Brindle says, Commissioner Brindle, we've got these principles that we're going to be following. We've got the zoning code. We know that we want some public uses there. At least for me, my thought of kind of running to ground with Frauenschuh and with United Properties and with the Beecher Group and Alina, this idea of using that 3.3 acre site for those three purposes seems to me to be something worth at least having a conversation about in December. That's what Frauenschuh's been asking for lately, is a conversation in December. And I think, we've been the ones that have created the confusion for staff. And so I think this is an opportunity for us today to kind of refocus direction for them, so they don't have to keep fielding these questions, not only from Frauenschuh, but from others, as to what to do on that site. And understanding that the question about the fire station serving the northeast part of our city is still an open issue, and that we need to keep that in mind as we look at what can happen on that site. Personally, I think it's better to have that fire station on the east side of 100 rather than the west side, trying to serve northeast Edina. But nonetheless, I think it deserves careful consideration as to whether that is the appropriate spot. I also don't like the idea that now we're talking about a process in 2021 that takes us all the way to 2022 before something starts to happen. So for me, I'd rather see what these folks have in mind through a work session with the HRA next month, and maybe that'll give us a sense of which direction we want to head. I mean, maybe we won't like that direction at all, but I don't also think that waiting until 2022 is such a great idea. 16 years to me, in a way, is long enough. Somebody might say, well, what's 16, 18 years? What's the difference? But we get a responsibility to our constituents too. I mean, this land, they say don't get rid of public land, but we traded out 3.3 acres here for almost 10 acres. We added public land. So I think the idea that we're going to be thinking about a potential private development here with some public use involved is the appropriate way to think about it. And then we've also got the value of the property, as Commissioner Brindle points out, that we can use either in a straight up sale or in conjunction with putting a fire station there or some other methodology that we're following. But the idea of going through another general RFP with us asking people to come in with their ideas on what we should do on this site with these ideas in mind that we already know are fixed, that we can probably focus on in a December work session and see where we get. I just think it's time to move on. Let's hear what people have in mind here. And I'll back up a second and say the beauty of senior co-op to me is that you've got people moving into something that's affordable, which we want to see happen in Edina. We just talked about senior affordable. This is senior affordable in an ownership sort of way. And there are going to be people that are going to be walking to all these different amenities that we have in that particular area. As Commissioner Staunton said years ago, we want this to be a place where people come and stay instead of come and go. And I think having senior housing there, to me, is really quite appealing, especially on a cooperative basis. So, you know, I want to give staff direction, but for me personally, my direction right now would be let's hear out what the partner is saying that we picked and not go back out to the general development community yet. Let's hold that as a possibility, but let's decide that maybe after we hear from what United Properties and Franchu has in mind for this particular piece of property and do it in a work session in December while we have a council intact and an HRA intact that has a lot of knowledge on this property. So, remember, Commissioner Staunton.
So I think one of the things, first of all, and although it feels like 16 years, it really hasn't been since 2004 that we've been working on this, but it feels like that. I would say that the biggest hang up until now has been that for many years, we've talked about a community center as that public use. And I think we're at a place, every time we've tried that, we've realized that either we can't fit it in there the way we want it, or there isn't enough demand for it, or it's too expensive, or it can't work financially. And so I think that has been the stumbling block all along that has inhibited us from getting something done. So I still think that the Grandview framework really contemplates a public use of some type here. And the question is, what else builds around that? And so I think it's a good idea to move forward with those principles in mind and the framework in mind. The question is whether we can do that with somebody who's been rummaging around in this for a while, Franchu, or whether we want other ideas. I don't have a problem with listening to them. The problem I'm going to have with that is I'm not going to be sure what other ideas might be out there to compete with them. So, you know, maybe the approach is to listen to them and then follow staff's plan if it's not satisfactory. But I think as a decision maker, it's going to be challenging for me to say that a combination of senior co-op housing and medical office is going to be the right answer if I think there's other ideas out there. That's the place I'm a little bit stuck on. I have the same interest in moving this along because it has been, even though it hasn't maybe been 16 years, it's certainly been 8 years since we delivered the framework. And it would be good to move forward on something. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Anderson.
My thought was I actually think it would make sense to hear out the Frauenschuh team in December. And I don't know protocol-wise if this makes sense, but I think inviting our two new council members / HRA members to participate, at least listen into that conversation, use it as an opportunity to transition a lot of information and institutional knowledge, have the conversation, make the decision. You know, it's one meeting. We decide that that's worth at least pursuing a little bit more, or we decide we're going to go and do exactly what the staff is saying and start a new process in January of 21. But it would just allow a little bit of conversation and extension to the new members that are going to be sitting here as well.
Yeah, good thought. We've talked about that on a couple of other matters as well. I think we might have them in on our city council meeting, the last meetings in December, and then the meetings in December, and then this last meeting in November. Commissioner Anderson.
Yes, thank you. In general, I find elements of agreement with every comment that's been made. Over the course of time, as you really look at that site, what I think everyone could generally agree on is there should be some public use there, and that's generally been anticipated. I agree with that. The green space concept.
Member Anderson, maybe you can go off video, and that might help. That's too bad.
That's probably Ron.
I think. Yeah. Yep.
There he's back.
Well.
Yep, we got you.
Did this happen again? Thanks. Okay. I don't know if you heard much of that.
You're just getting to the good part.
Yeah, just coming to that.
You do great as before you start talking.
Okay. I guess to be a little more concise then, it's a good idea to have a work session. And I think doing it in this time frame is a good idea. It helps us to hone our thoughts. It will focus. The one thing that I notice in a staff recommendation here is pedestrian crossing over the railroad tracks. I think that's a particularly good idea. It will allow, at some point, those tracks may be valuable. They may allow a tie-in to either LRT or some other mode. And so having that available or even considering access from that site at a future point, I think makes a great deal of sense. The housing element that you discussed, Mr. Chair, I think is a good one. It may not be the only one, but it's definitely a need. So let's wait and see. But I generally concur with everything that's been mentioned. Thank you.
So, Commissioner Anderson, just so I understand, are you thinking along the lines of Member Fisher or Commissioner Fisher and myself that we hear from Frounchu in December and United Properties and then go from there?
I am, because I think it gives us a focus to think about it. General discussions are useful, but they're opinions. So, beginning to really focus thoughts, and I agree, sooner or later, there has to be a decision made about how to proceed there. And having a work session doesn't commit us to anything. It's simply a matter of the ability to focus and listen, and maybe that allows us to make a decision in short order.
Okay. Commissioner Staunton and Commissioner Brindle, are you comfortable with that sort of an approach?
I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with it. I just, they're not my favorite developer. I'll just put that out there. I know it's public, but I think there are others who are more creative, who are easier to work with. I think I'm frustrated by staff's experience with this developer versus council experience with this developer. It is, if you look at the two, you would think that we're talking about a different developer. We're talking about the same developer who takes advantage of the influence that they think they have with the council, and I don't appreciate that. And I'd like somebody who's more straight up, who is more trustworthy, frankly. And I think that we have met those developers in other projects. And I know these are harsh words, but they come with the disappointment that I've experienced with this developer over time. So
yeah, the one cautionary note I would make Commissioner Brindle, is that the inference from your comments is that they are influential as the rest of us. They are not, in my opinion.
Well, I think they think
They may believe that what they believe and what actually exists are two different things. But the fact is that we chose them. And now they have United Properties, which is another Edina-based development company that is a very good developer. And I think if you're comfortable, then we'll just direct staff to let's have a work session with those two developers in December, and then go from there. Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Manager Neal, Executive Director Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to do this during my report. Well, it is my report, so I'll just do it now. We have three. I would call them significant items that are already queued up for your December 10th HRA meeting, and right now we only have one HRA meeting scheduled in December. It's scheduled for December 10th. The second one would fall on December 24th, so we have anticipated not having that meeting that day. But the other three items that are already queued up for this December 10th meeting is receiving the Housing Strategy Task Force report, so that's important. We have a report that's been in a queue, kind of working its way to you for telling you about the Affordable Housing Compliance report. So all of these sort of older affordable housing commitments that we've gotten from developers, we've been doing some compliance testing on those, and we've told those building owners that December 10th is the day we're making that report to you. So there's some anticipation by those building owners and other people in that business of something happening on that day. Finally, the infrastructure improvements that we've been discussing for the Grandview District already, based on sort of the Avidor TIF proceeds. And we've talked about this before too. We gave our city engineer and his staff some direction to develop some projects. He has done that, and he's bringing those projects, giving you an update on those projects that day. So adding something of this nature to that agenda is possible, but we'd have to be we'd have to work in fairly quick order, I think, on the other items, or just acknowledge that we may be extending our meeting a little later that day as well. So I just want to lay that out for you as you think about this choice.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm hearing that list. I mean, why wouldn't we peel off the Grandview infrastructure, put it with this one, and do a second meeting sometime in December?
Could. Yeah, we could.
Or we still, what did you do with the second meeting in November on the 26th of November? Did you just cancel it?
Well,
yep, because that's...
We're going to have turkey with our HRA meeting?
Yeah, thank you, member. Thank you, Commissioner Staunton. Yeah, well, you're supposed to be in isolation anyway, so it's just you and your wife. Why not have a Zoom meeting?
Right. We can't have family over, so we can all get together ourselves virtually for Thanksgiving breakfast.
We have too many holidays. That's our problem. So I think
we wouldn't have to do it on a. We wouldn't have to do it on a
we
Thursday.
We haven't looked at that, Commissioner Staunton, but we could.
We could do some date. I mean, since it's virtual, if people are traveling or doing other things, it's not going to. We can still connect.
If that's I think that's a good idea, given the importance of some of these items that are coming to you. I don't think you want to give short discussions, and especially on the task force report. That's a major report that's coming to you. So we can start asking some questions about your calendar. Jen Garski can reach out and start to find another date when we can do the Grandview items.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks for that suggestion, Member Staunton, and I'll still be happy to talk to you in the virtual world on Thanksgiving.
I'll bring the cranberries.
All right. Thank you for that, everybody. That good discussion. All right. We have anything else, Manager Neal?
We do not have anything else for
All
today.
right,
no.
comments from commissioners. Anybody have any comments they wish to make? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Ms. Olson, with respect to adjournment.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Brindle,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Staunton,
Aye.
Mayor Hovland.
Aye, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.